wondered if lack of sleep could negatively impact your fertility, your risk of miscarriage, and of course, the chance of taking home a healthy baby? And if you do have sleep problems, have you ever tried to figure out how to resolve them once and for all? This is exactly what we're going to be talking today on this Ask Gabriela Rosa live. And I would love to make sure that I answer any questions that you have. My name is Gabriela Rosa. I'm a fertility specialist. I am also a Harvard University awarded scholar. And for the last 2 decades, I have helped couples overcome infertility and miscarriage, even when other treatments have failed. And we have now taken over 136,000 people through some of our flagship programs. And I absolutely am so grateful for all of the things that I have been able to learn and the knowledge that I get to pass on to you guys here as well. I thought today I would do the mufti thing. I hope that you guys are not too offended. I thought, given the fact that, we're going to, but you will see that part of what we're going to be talking about today does kind of have something to do with the activewear. So, hello, Mitra. Oh, my babies. I love to know about my babies. We are definitely going to be having a bit of a blast. I do want to acknowledge you, though, because I know how full on and hard it can be to show up, and to keep showing up, especially when the disappointments mount and the fertility journey and the journey in general is long. So I want to acknowledge you for not only being here, but wanting to learn things that are actually going to make a difference to your particular situation, to your health, and of course, to your ability of being the very best version of yourself, no matter what. So that's what we're here to do today, is really kind of get to the crux of how do we get quality sleep, because there is absolutely no doubt that sleep and quality sleep is absolutely paramount for optimum fertility. And we're going to talk more about that in a moment. But you will also see that I have added a handout today. Normally I don't add the handout until the end of the session, but today I thought that I would do it in the beginning of the session. First thing I would love to know is, where are you listening from, and do you have any questions about this topic? And we're live right now on Instagram as well as on Facebook. So if you want access to the handout Instagram, sorry, you're going to have to jump over to the Gabriela Rosa Fertility page on Facebook to get access to it. The replays always stay up on the page, so if you want to listen to it at another time, feel free. And of course, come back to the handout if you want to. But the reason that I've actually added the handout early today is because I didn't want to spend a lot of that, in this session talking about the biochemical aspects of lack of sleep or lack of quality sleep. I wanted to get really practical into helping you to understand exactly what it is that you need to do to optimize your chances of having the best quality sleep you can. And this will absolutely apply to you whether you are trying to conceive or not, because as we know, sleep is great for a variety of reasons. For being a decent human being is one of them. Because remember, when we're not having quality sleep, what happens? We don't feel our best. We feel tired, we can get cranky, we get snappy. Then that impacts the relationships that we have. It impacts our ability to perform at work. It impacts memory. It impacts the ability to think and be sharp and on the ball about whatever needs to be done. So there are lots of benefits to making sure that we get quality sleep. What's interesting about it, though, is that about 50% of the world population has problems sleeping. And isn't it fascinating that with the, reconnection of the population through technology, and I say reconnection because, it's such a, it's a constant battle, isn't it? It's a constant struggle. And I bet that some of you are watching me from your bed and your mobile device right now. I'm not going to point fingers and say who, but I'm pretty sure that this is happening somewhere around the world. And that is one of the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of what the benefits are to ensuring that we check out the technology outside of the bedroom, but also to figure out, how it is that we can really get to that point where quality sleep is just something that happens on demand, because it can be really tricky for some people to have consistent quality sleep. And that typically is because we lack a strategy. right? We lack a strategy to make sure that that actually happens. And believe it or not, what's fascinating is that even though we grow from babies to adulthood, and we think that we don't really need to get the same amount or level of quality of sleep that we did when we were children, the reality is that we do, although we end up fitting in all of our lives in whatever the tasks that we need to get done in the time that we have, and our sleep kind of fits into whatever's left over. The truth about it is that it has to be the opposite way if you really are to prioritize having quality sleep, and you have to set your environment up in such a way that it reproduces itself every single day in terms of you being able to have the quality sleep that you're looking for. So it's really, really vital that we talk about some of these concepts that are going to help us to just make sure that it happens day in, day out, and hopefully night in, night out. So that's what we need to do. Nari says, watching this when I should be sleeping after being awake all night. Well, you see, I knew somewhere, somehow, someone around the world was going to be listening to me right now when they should be sleeping or from their bed, somewhere, somehow, somewhere. Yeah, I'm often not wrong about these things. Look, the reality is it is tricky. It's difficult. How many times have you caught yourself wanting to go to sleep and then scrolling through endless Facebook posts and Instagram posts and whatever else, right? So it takes that self-policing, right, of kind of setting some structure, setting some ideals in terms of what it is that you're wanting to do and what you're wanting to achieve, and actually sticking to them, because it's so easy not to, right? It's so easy to kind of say, oh, I'm going to do this, and then we don't, and then we continue. It's another night that we've had bad sleep, and that sleep deficit just builds up, builds up, builds up, builds up. And of course, that doesn't help anybody. As we said before, it has many, many impacts around your entire life. So definitely makes a huge problem, or it's a huge problem. So I can see in the comments there, yeah, I mean, even though, Nari, you were up all night, right? So very good. Now, let's go through. I would love, if you have specific questions about this topic, please do put it on the comments in Facebook or on Instagram. I'll scroll through and just see if there's anything else. But there's there's lots of questions that I often get asked about this topic, and I'm going to just read them out as I normally do so that you know kind of where we're heading with this conversation. And then, of course, I'm going to be sharing, as usual, 3 big ideas. And as you probably know by now, if you've watched any of these live episodes before on the replay or live, I always look at what is the 20% of the effort that we can put into anything that will give us 80% of our results, right? That's how we treat patients in the clinic. That's how I live my life, because, we have to almost synthesize and summarize the things that we do, and we have to make sure that the effort that we put in is going to be giving us a high return, because otherwise what happens is that we're focusing on the 80% of the effort that gives us 20% of the result. And this is what keeps lots of couples going around in circles on the fertility journey. I see this very, very frequently. People really struggle. They start doing so many different things. They don't know what are the specific things that are going to make a difference in their particular situation. And so they start to, do everything they think is going to help. The problem with that is that it ends up just being a lot of effort for a low return of the investment of that effort. And that is the one thing that, being busy and treating lots of people in our clinic, I like to make sure that not only we are leveraging everything that we can in terms of recommendations, but that our patients are getting the very best in terms of that as well. So that is why I focus, whenever I talk about the 3 big ideas, I focus on the absolute things that if you do those things, you will get a much better outcome or a much better result than you have been getting up until now, right? But you do have to make sure that you're focusing on those things and that you're being consistent on those things. You don't get results, you know, like anything in life, like exercise or whatever it is that you want to get results in. There are things you can control and there are things that you cannot control. So really, when it comes to fertility, there's a bit of a catch-22 that goes on, which is, you know, do sleep disturbances or circadian rhythm disturbances or sleep problems affect fertility and hormonal balance and therefore fertility, or do hormonal imbalances affect, you know, sleep? It is a catch-22 because it's a chicken and the egg type situation, but they do have a correlation. So it's kind of both, right? In the direct impact, you can't do something that's going to directly impact your fertility. Like, there are lots of things that you can do that are going to have indirect impacts on your hormonal levels. First of all, on your circadian rhythms, on your hormonal levels, on the balance that the body seeks in terms of homeostasis. And then once that happens, it will yield a different result. You know how I often talk about the fact that when it comes to fertility, whether it is that we're wanting to overcome infertility or miscarriage or whatever challenges that people are experiencing, what we see often is the result of a whole lot of different actions that have been taken or not taken throughout a biochemical pathway. So the result that we see is fertility problems or miscarriage, for example, right? But what has led to that is a whole lot of things that preceded it. Now, the interesting thing and the important thing is that you can't directly impact what's going on here. Right? If you, for example, had a miscarriage, you can't make that pregnancy viable again. If in the particular cycle you haven't conceived, well, you can't then conceive in that cycle again. You certainly can try again next month. But what I'm saying is that, you know, there are things that you cannot affect, which is the direct impact of the result. But you can impact lots of things before that result. And this piece, the sleep piece, is such a vital piece when it comes to this situation. I have actually added in the handout, if you have a chance to have a look at it, I've added a really great diagram that was published in an endocrinology journal in last year. And it talks about, you know, the impact of sleep disturbances on circadian rhythms and vice versa, but also then the impact that that has on hormonal levels, which then impact fertility and, of course, the ability to have a good outcome in terms of IVF or even to keep a healthy pregnancy to term. So the answer to will lack of sleep or lack of quality sleep impact my fertility and my ability to take home a healthy baby is absolutely a resounding yes. And again, if you go through on the handout, I've actually given you a resource in there, which is an infographic that we've done here in the clinic talking about exactly the ins and outs of those facts. So, you know, I think that it's pretty fair to say that there are lots of things that we could talk about in terms of how those impacts happen, and go ahead and have a look at all of those resources that I've provided for you, because that will help. But, you know, really I want to get into the kind of the nuts and bolts of what it is that you can do. So some of the questions that often get asked in terms of this particular topic: how does sleep impact reproductive function? We've talked about that, and there's more on the handout. Am I getting enough sleep? Is shift work problematic? How can I improve quality sleep? Does inadequate sleep affect semen parameters? What can I take to improve my sleep? When is the best time to sleep? Does inadequate sleep affect hormonal balance? And I'm waking up tired. No matter how long of sleep I get, what can I do about that? And how can I fit sleep into my busy schedule? And what I would like to do, actually, before I start sharing the 3 big ideas, I think that this idea of fitting sleep into a busy schedule needs to be revisited. It needs to be kind of reconsidered, right? Because I, for one, have an incredibly busy schedule. So often the time of the day that I am most productive is very, very early morning. I'm very much a morning person, and it wasn't always like that. I kind of I trained myself into that. And there's lots and lots and lots of evidence talking about, lots of research, ongoing research right now, talking about genetics and how some people are night owls and other people are, you know, whatever it is that they call the people who are early risers. Let's just say that there is a difference in terms of those genetic components. But what I will say as well is that it is possible to train your body to be able to do a certain thing. You've got to obviously figure out what works for you. What I know for sure when it comes to fertility, we need to be making sure that sleep is sacred, right? It is absolutely something that happens. The amount of sleep that you need to get happens in the time that is required. So the best practice recommendation in terms of this is 8 hours. Right? So you need to be asleep for 8 hours. In order to be asleep for 8 hours, you need to typically, the average adult needs to be in bed for 9 hours. So that's where I would start in terms of planning the day, right? It's about kind of figuring out, okay, what are the 9 hours that I am going to find myself in bed for, ready for sleep? Okay, that's the first thing. And I think that that's one thing that if you actually do that, it makes such a huge difference. I've seen that for myself. So for me personally, I typically, depending on what's going on, I will never get up, you know, after 6 o'clock in the morning. But typically I will get up to make sure that I fit everything in my day. I'll get up at about 4:30. I'm at work already by 5, and I'll do all the things that I need to do. Then at 7 o'clock, I leave, I go to the gym, train for an hour, come back, do some more work, then take the kids to school, and then, you know, come back and do more of my day. And typically I'm finished with work at about 4 or 5 o'clock. Some days it's longer and it's later because of whatever is going on, and, you know, if I've got to give a talk or got to actually speak to someone and have a specific meeting or whatever else. But typically it's pretty fair to say that by 4 or 5 o'clock I'm shutting down because I've already done all the things that I needed to do early in the morning. Typically in our household, you know, my husband, he also, you know, wakes up pretty early. So basically in our household, we've geared everything up so that, you know, it's an early kind of dinner time, bedtime, and, you know, that's essentially how it happens. It is not unusual, I will have to say, it's not unusual for me to be in bed, typically asleep by 8:30. It's quite usual, actually. But the reason that that happens is because I've figured out what works best for my body, right? I've figured out what it is that I need in order to feel good when I wake up, and also in order to make sure that I've got the energy that I need to get all the things done that I need to get done. But also, what's wonderful about those early hours in the morning is that I don't get disrupted or interrupted by lots of people wanting lots of things from me. What's also great is that what we know in terms of melatonin release, which is extremely important for egg quality, is that by 9 o'clock at night, that melatonin release is already happening at a very high level. And if you're not in bed resting and kind of getting ready for bed, you're going to be missing out. You're going to be missing out. Whoops, somebody called me inappropriately, and it paused Instagram, but I hope that we're back there. If you're doing that, if you're not in bed, and then, you know, your production of melatonin gets decreased, not only it's going to negatively impact your sleep, but it's also going to impact egg and sperm quality as well. So we need to start looking at it in terms of biochemistry and what it is that we need to do about it, but also how do we set up our lives so that these things happen? Some people, you know, they love to be watching TV at all hours of the night. Not great for your sleep, just because, you know, those screens and the light and everything else does keep the pineal active, and the pineal gland is incredibly important, part of the hypothalamus, incredibly important for making sure that hormonal balance happens. And we're talking here about metabolic hormones as well as reproductive hormones. So if we're not setting our lives up in such a way that's going to help to enhance the way that our normal biochemistry and physiology works, we're actually doing it a disservice. So we need to consider all of those factors and really make sure that we're fitting in everything else that we need to fit in the time that is left over. Not do that to our sleep, because that's going to be a problem. The other thing that's also important in terms of shift work, there's a lot of talk in terms of shift work and how shift work will impact someone's ability to, that whole circadian rhythm. So like I said, if you go onto the handout, you will see a great diagram. And that circadian rhythm disruption is really hugely problematic when it comes to shift work. And, there is evidence that shows that people who do shift work have reduced fecundity, and of course that relates to the ability of taking a healthy pregnancy to term and getting pregnant in the first place. So we need to take into consideration that whatever it is that we're doing will have an impact. Sometimes, there is little that you can do. There's always something you can do. I mean, obviously changing jobs is kind of very dramatic often, but and sometimes people do shift work because they get paid more as a result of doing it, and there's a whole lot of considerations. But honestly, in the long term, people who do shift work do live less and have lesser quality of life and have more higher risk of depression, anxiety, and all sorts of other kind of complications in terms of their health as well as fertility. So that's probably why they get paid more, but you've got to almost ask, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And for some people it's worth it and it's a means to an end. For other people it's like, okay, no, I better do something different about this. And in the handout, I actually provide a link to the infographic that we've created, and we talk a lot about shift work in there. So that question is answered in more detail with lots of data if you're interested. So go ahead and have a look at that. But shift work is definitely problematic for fertility. It's something that I don't particularly love and don't recommend. If people ask me, should I do it? Should I not do it? It's something that I try and dissuade people from doing wherever possible. And sleep, again, in terms of that catch-22, one thing that you need to understand is that all of these recommendations apply in the same way to men and women, right? So as I always say, fertility is a team sport. And what is going to happen is that everything that you do that's going to enhance your biochemical function is going to optimize your health, your well-being, and of course, will improve fertility, because fertility really is almost a side effect of the body being in ultimate balance. And so if that's not happening, what's going to end up occurring is that you're going to be detracting from your body's ability to utilize resources, to put nutrients and energy production, and just generally kind of allocate energy to that particular system or organs. And then, of course, that in itself will decrease the ability to take home a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. So if you don't understand yet the impact of male fertility and female fertility and how those two things go together, I've done two talks that talk about this in great depth. One is the egg quality talk. So if you go through the replays, you'll be able to actually find those in the Gabriela Rosa fertility page. I highly recommend it, because in there I go through a lot of detail as to how male fertility actually has an impact as an indirect way to female fertility and, of course, the ability to take home a healthy baby. So I highly recommend that you understand that in more depth if you need to. Otherwise, you can just take my word for it right now that whatever the male partner does will impact the ability to take home a healthy baby as well. And of course, we want to make sure that we are optimizing your chances as a couple. So whatever happens, I often get people asking me, but I don't have problem getting pregnant. My problem is taking a healthy, is preventing miscarriage, for example. Well, the reality is that there are 9 category reasons for miscarriage. The reason that it happens to begin with is because there are other factors that are getting in the way, typically to do with male and female and environmental factors. So all of these pieces will make a difference. So every little bit counts is what I'm saying here, right? So I often talk about this idea that it would be nice, I was talking to my mum this week, and she was saying how she didn't want to do such and such thing, and I said, well, look, the reality is that you're not an island, Mum, if you're watching today. You're not an island, and when none of us are an island, right? The things that we do, whether we like it or not, will impact our partners. And in this area of sleep, it also makes a huge difference, because guess what? If you want to go to bed early and your partner gets into the bedroom and starts turning on lights and making noise and doing this and doing that, guess what? who's going to get great sleep in that kind of situation? Probably neither of you, because one person is going to be very annoyed. It's going to bite the head off the other person, and that's also not going to be very useful and conducive to making a healthy baby. And in the long term, it will definitely negatively impact the relationship. So it's about, remember how I was saying, it's about making sure that we've got those pieces in the environment really set up in such a way that's going to be helpful for both of you. So figuring out those differences amongst two people is key, absolutely crucial, and working around them and working through them so that you can both get the quality sleep that you need and you deserve in order to optimize your fertility is going to be absolutely essential. So those are some of the issues that we need to navigate when we're talking about sleep, because sometimes it might be that your partner is snoring. By the way, if your partner is snoring, is it because they're overweight, and do they have sleep apnea? Because if they do, that's also going to negatively impact not only the ability to conceive, but keep a healthy pregnancy to term. There is definitely evidence showing that sleep disturbances that are, diagnosed or even undiagnosed, but that have an impact on a physiological sense, is definitely going to have an impact on fertility. So one of the key things is to make sure that you are screened, have a sleep study if you need to. There are mild type sleep situations or problems, and then there are really severe ones. And so figuring out which type you have, going to see a specialist in terms of this can be really, really useful, because if you do have sleep apnea, you do need to get that treated. Otherwise, you are going to be negatively impacting not only your chances of having a baby, but being around for that baby in the long term. So all of those pieces will make a huge, huge difference. And it's important to make sure that you're considering it in a very holistic way. Okay. So in terms of these questions, let's just see if there's anything else here that I need to single out right at this point. Getting enough sleep, I think we've talked about. And improving sleep is what we're going to be talking about next. So I think that we've set the scene. There's a couple of questions here. Love your thoughts on exercise at night and eating dinner after 8 p.m. affecting sleep. Yes, I love that question, and I will absolutely answer that question. And thoughts on how to stay asleep. I wake up between 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. almost every night. That's also a really great question. Fantastic. All right, so let me actually, before I go through and start sharing some of the big ideas, Chantel, your question is going to be answered by what I'm going to be talking about next. But in terms of Angela's question, which is, how do I actually prevent sleeping waking up between 3 and 4? Sometimes, in the Chinese kind of body clock, if you actually Google this, Chinese body clock, you will see that different organ systems in traditional Chinese medicine represent different organs and organ systems, different times, during the day and night, represent different organ systems. And what's interesting is that I have seen a correlation in clinic, and I haven't seen any studies on this, but I have certainly seen correlation, because 3 to 4 a.m. from memory is liver time. And that's where the liver is doing a lot of detoxification and kind of, going through its phases of detoxification. Obviously, it's happening all the time, but certainly there is a higher level of activity going on around that time. And so what I often find is that addressing and optimizing health in general, which obviously will optimize liver function, is going to also help to improve sleep. So sometimes it's about those biochemical chain reactions that we talk about, and addressing everything that you can along the way. Every single piece and every single thing you do to be healthier is only going to help to improve your sleep. Sometimes what people have difficulty with is figuring out, but okay, what is that? Right? And part of this, conversation is about understanding that, but also I've shared a whole lot in the handout in terms of best practice advice. So again, if you're just joining me now, definitely there's a handout link on the top or the bottom of this video, and you'll be able to actually access that at any point and be able to see what I'm talking about in terms of recommendations. But, in a clinic, we normally would address things like this through herbal medicines and just a general hormonal balancing type treatment protocol. And that makes a big difference. In terms of the practical things of what it is that you can do to optimize that, that's what we're going to be talking about next. So are there any other questions at this point? Please do put them in to the hello. I sing hello on Instagram. I love it when you guys interact and ask me questions, because it's sometimes, like I feel like I'm just talking to myself. So it's really good when you guys ask me whatever's on your mind. So go ahead and ask questions if you have them. All right, so let's then talk about, so the next thing that I want to go through and talk about is we're going to start with those big ideas that are going to make a difference. Remember, we're focusing here on the 20% of the effort that will give us 80% of our result. And what that means is that if you were to do nothing else, right, if you were to do nothing else but the things that I'm going to recommend next, already you would have a major improvement in terms of your sleep and your sleep quality. Mind you, and this is what I like to, bring your attention to at this point, it is never a straight line, I wish that it was. And sometimes, things kind of like get worse before they get better, right? And in terms of sleep, it's no different, especially when we're wanting to make differences or changes to sleep patterns and sleep function. So it's absolutely essential that you understand this, that just because you're going to start implementing something new, it is not just going to magically improve everything overnight, okay? And what you might even find is that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And if it does happen to get worse before it gets better, what you need to do is you need to stick to your guns. You need to just ride it out, right? Just keep at it consistently. And by all means, these, as I said, these talks stay here. I do my best to make sure that, whenever there are comments in there that I come back, or if there are questions, I come back and answer them. So by all means, reach out if you're still feeling that, there are things that you can be doing after this conversation and after you've implemented these recommendations for a good period of time. If you still need some extra guidance, absolutely fine. But I do want to make sure that you are clear about the fact that none of this is going to just magically happen, right, overnight, and that you will need to be super consistent. That is the key. Right? It's the absolute key. Consistency, being consistent, applying it, and then doing it again and again and again and again until you develop and you build this kind of, just muscle memory of this thing just happening, right? I mean, these days I don't even have to make myself go to the gym. I just know, like, it comes 7 a.m., I'm out the door, right? I just know that it's just so conditioned. And I think that that's really the thing that is important to bring up and to your attention here is that conditioning. Conditioning is everything. Making sure that, the things that you choose, the 20% of the effort, that's going to give you 80% of the result. And if you focus on that, then basically you just need to make sure that you're consistently being and reconditioning and conditioning yourself to just keep at it, okay? If something that will also help, I just remembered, I've done a talk on creating lasting habit change and exactly how to create and enforce and reinforce those habit loops in a way that's going to help you to not only implement something new, but keep, continue and keep it going. So if you go through that talk, which is one of the Ask Gabriela Rosa Live replays that's available on the page, you will be able to also get some great ideas from there of things that you can implement and that you can do to help you along this path. But the very first big idea in terms of sleep is this. It's actually sleep hygiene. There is a thing called sleep hygiene. I know the first time I heard it as well, I was like, what? Do you scrub your sleep? What is it that you do there? It's a bit weird. But no, sleep hygiene is all about making sure that you have a set wake up time and a set sleep time. Now, a lot of the biggest problem that people have when they are used to going to sleep really, really late and, having their difficulty waking up in the morning is that going to sleep earlier doesn't usually actually happen, because if you've got your body used to doing something, i.e. going to sleep really late, it's almost like it's a habit, right? And you've conditioned yourself to that habit. So how do you break it? Well, it's certainly not going to be by just choosing to go to bed earlier at night, believe it or not. So you do the opposite. You actually wake up earlier. I know it seems counterintuitive, but let me tell you, if you're not used to waking up at 5 a.m. and sleep hygiene recommends that you set your wake up time to 5 a.m., right? Not 4:30, not 6, 5. And there is a reason for this in terms of circadian rhythm. So if you set your alarm, and this is every single day, 7 days a week, Sundays included, and this, by the way, is great practice for when you have a baby, because trust me, you're going to need it. So, you know, setting your alarm 7 days, 5 a.m., and just making sure that you consistently go through. The first week is going to be absolute hell, right? And I mean hell on earth. And you might even wake up and you go like, oh my God, this is just too early. It's dark outside. I don't want to be here. I'm just going to go back to sleep. So what do I recommend in order for you to not only get up, but actually do something good in the earlier time of the day where you're going to be getting up? There is a fantastic practice called the Miracle Morning. So there's a book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. It's available on Amazon. Just check it out. And it's a process that is, our patients in the clinic, you know, from time to time we do a Miracle Morning 30-day challenge, and gosh, every single time people just, what they accomplish in 30 days is mind-blowing in terms of their own personal, you know, development and just, you know, implementing a new process that's quite life-transforming and affirming is absolutely magical. But the reason that I would recommend it in this case is just so that you are awake and you stay awake, right? So the Miracle Morning is something that I would highly, highly recommend, and it really blends in nicely with that principle of sleep hygiene, which is you get up at 5 a.m. no matter what. Now, guess what? If you get up at 5 a.m. no matter what, you will naturally be tired at around 9 o'clock at night, which is the time that you should be going to sleep. So nobody's going to start, you know, nobody's going to have to make you go to sleep earlier. It's just going to happen because you will feel tired. And if you are optimizing your fertility and your chances to have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby, you're not going to be indulging in caffeinated beverages and caffeinated drinks. So trust me, by 9 a.m., you want to be closing your eyes. So the key aspect here and the way that you do this is really by optimizing every single thing that you can. So you organize yourself to make sure that this is possible, and then you ensure that you're just, you know, again, consistently applying it. You definitely want to make sure that you remember one very important thing, and that's also why the Miracle Morning is great, because it's a companion, right, that you can implement, that you can use. There is a Miracle Morning Facebook group, you know, there's a whole lot of different kind of support things that you can put in place. And these people, literally, that's how I started getting up at 4:30 in the morning. It was that I decided, okay, I'm going to do this Miracle Morning thing. It wasn't the other way around. It was just like, I decided to do this, and then basically in doing it, I was getting up early, and then I just kind of trained myself to do that. So it was quite easy. So in terms of sleep hygiene and making sure that your body is naturally, then your hormonal balance starts to get back to where it needs to be. You see, it's amazing. The body has this almost miraculous way of just balancing itself when given the proper environment, the proper opportunity. So that's why sleep hygiene is the first huge big idea, because it's going to be the one thing that if you do that, yes, in the first week you're going to be so tired that you're going to want to die. Yes, you're going to be cursing me. Yes, you're going to be, you know, probably not be very coherent at night because you're going to be really tired and you want to be going to bed very early. But things will just normally shift and you get used to it, and all of a sudden you start to feel that you wake up in the morning and you have energy and you're ready to go. One of the reasons as to why, and this is one of the big questions that people ask, is, you know, how is it that I can have as much sleep as I'm having and I am not actually feeling refreshed in the morning? Typically, it's to do with a whole variety of different things, from anxiety to depression to caffeine, you know, stimulants, to you name it. You know, there's many different reasons as to why this might happen. Nutritional deficiencies can also be a part of that, but also not having a set bedtime and wake up time will have that impact, because the body, the circadian rhythm, does require to be regular, and it's like the biological clock, right? It's called kind of like analogy of a clock, for a reason, because it's just how it's supposed to be. So it's important to take all of that into consideration as well. So that's the first big idea, sleep hygiene, 5 a.m. wake-ups. And, you know, there are lots, if there are questions about this, and I talk about this in the handout as well that you guys have access to, so please go ahead and put any questions that you might have about this particular topic, but it's such an important one. It's probably the most important. If I was, you know, typically when I deal with people in the clinic where they're having sleep problems, it is the one thing that if I get them to do nothing else, it's the one thing I get them to do. And invariably, once the first kind of week or two passes, they tell me, wow, what a difference. So make sure, apply this. If you do nothing else, apply this. The second big idea, and you know, this is the reason I'm telling myself that I'm actually wearing gym clothes here today, not because, you know, I didn't have time to actually get ready for this talk at all. The reason is because I wanted to talk to you about the second big idea. And the second big idea is push hard things and apply mindfulness, right? And what do I mean by pushing heavy things? Well, exercise. Exercise specifically will help to not only rebalance the circadian rhythm, but also it will help to utilize that excess kind of anxious energy that often keeps people awake at night. And if we couple that with applying mindfulness, and I'll talk a little bit about some tools and techniques that you can apply at night, but also during the day to help center you, it's a beautiful and perfect combination. There are a couple of things that I just, you know, because I apply all of these things that I'm actually sharing with you, I know they work, right? I don't experience anxiety. I don't experience sleep problems. Ever, have never in my whole life. And the reason, my husband, on the other hand, does and has for his entire life complained about it, and so much so that I actually made him learn to specifically meditate so that he could deal with this. But the reason that I don't is because I do two very, very important things. Whenever I go to bed at night, whatever has happened in my day, is happening in my day, is going to happen in my day, tomorrow is going to happen tomorrow. Whatever has happened in my day, and, you know, whether it was good or bad, or whether it was what I wanted it to be or not, I literally park at the door when I leave my office. It's like, okay, you know what? This is just how it is. There's no point in ruminating about it, in focusing on it, in, you know, dwelling on it, and doing anything other than letting go of what I cannot control. And I think that this is part of a really good practice for just life and living. And that's why I don't have anxiety, because trust me, I have many reasons as to why that potentially could be an issue for me, because there's lots of things, always many balls in the air. And so what happens is that in order to be able to function, I just compartmentalize. I just focus on what's in front of me right now. And that's part of being mindful. So instead of looking at what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day, the next month, the next year, I literally just go, you know what is it that I need to do today to ensure that tomorrow I have a better day or an easier day, or, you know, am able to manage whatever it is that I'm doing. And honestly, I deal with what's in front of me at that particular moment, because there's no point in, again, trying to just, you know, go crazy about it all, because it's just never going to be what you want it to be anyway. It's never going to be easier than you think, really, hardly ever, let's be honest. It's never going to take less time than you think. It's always typically the opposite, right? And it's not going to be, you know, like life in general. It throws curveballs. So the fact is that the sooner that we actually go accept what is, and then we start dealing with what is in front of us in terms of that mindfulness that I speak about, the easier sleep becomes, because all of a sudden we're not actually focused on what the things are that we cannot control, on the things that we are upset about, on the things that, you know, we are ruminating on. Like, there's no point in doing any of that. So if there is no point in doing any of that, then guess what? Focus on what's in front of you, and being mindful in each moment of what's in front of you, and knowing that no matter what it is, and I can see Ali here, no matter what it is, this too shall pass is so vital. And it's such a good rule for living, because what happens is that if you can approach each day like that, your nights are going to be so much easier. You're not going to have, you know, these kind of ruminating thoughts that will keep you awake at night. So that's when mindfulness is really great. And if you do have a racing head, right, in that time where you should be going to sleep, then what I would do, there's a little technique called body scanning or body feeling. And body scanning or body feeling is literally you start at your toes. And what you do is you focus all of your attention and energy on what's going on in your toes. Around your toes, feeling the sensations of the covers on your toes, feeling like literally you're just going through and you're focusing your entire attention in that one point. And then you start to kind of bring that up. So now it's on the top of the feet, and then on the bottom of the feet, and then on the ankles, and then, like, quite seriously, I never get to my calves, like, ever. When I do this, right? If ever I'm kind of like finding that it's a little bit harder to just come down than usual, my calves is the part that I've never, ever haven't gotten past, right? So and any time that the mind kind of goes away somewhere else, you just bring it back to your toes, right? Bring it back to your feet, bring it back to where it is that you're feeling those sensations, and that makes a huge difference in just calming down the system. Okay, so that is what mindfulness is all about. And it doesn't have to be, I mean, sure, you can learn to meditate, like you can go and do a course and learn to meditate, but it's just as simple as bringing your attention to your breathing, or to a sensation in your body, or to a sound that you want to make whilst you're sitting down. You know, I was trained in Vedic meditation, which basically is kind of like transcendental meditation. So 20 minutes twice a day, and you meditate to a mantra. So when thoughts come back in, you just focus on your mantra. And there are so many ways. You know, the mindfulness piece is just really kind of like whenever your mind is going elsewhere, whenever you're going, you know, you're just focusing on what's going on right now in front of you. And, you know, The Power of Now, the book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, is one that I would highly, highly recommend. Yeah, Yoga Nidra is also great. I mean, anything that basically is going to bring you back into your body, focusing on your body, is going to be fantastic, right? So in terms of mindfulness, first of all, and then we're going to talk about pushing heavy things. But, you know, in terms of mindfulness, all of those things are going to be really, really helpful, because they're just going to bring you back to your center. And being out of your center is the thing that causes all of the disruption and the chaos and the anxiety and the stress and the, you know, depression and everything else, because all of a sudden we're trying to manage and focus the things that we cannot control. There is no sense in doing that in the long term, although as humans, we are the only animals who actually manage to do it, and not only do it, but do it again and again and again and again. And it's just not helpful, right? So when it comes to sleep and wanting to optimize sleep, these are some of the pieces that are going to make a huge difference in you just being able to just get back into center. We did a course for our patients in the program, in the National Fertility Breakthrough Program this year, or last year and this year, the end of the year. And it was called Centered. And that became our word for the year. And it's so true. When you just kind of come back to your middle, come back to your center, you're so much more powerful in being able to do whatever it is that you need to do, even when everything else around you is in chaos, right? It's what basically the word equanimity means. Equanimity is balance amidst chaos, right? There's lots of that. Life is all about that. But if you can actually train yourself to just keep coming back to your center, all of the upsets, the things that happen here, there, and everywhere, they're not going to affect you, because ultimately you're just focused on what needs to happen next. Does this help? Let me know. I hope that it helps. I hope that it's making sense. So now that we've talked about, and there's two pieces to this, right? Because we want to be using all of those hormones that I talked about. We want to be using all of that excess energy. As much as it's great to be able to come back to your center, you also need to be able to actually utilize all of that extra energy and anxiety and whatever else that may be kind of pending and unresolved and kind of being hanging around. So the reason that I say push heavy things is because honestly, I hate cardio. Like, oh my Lord. I really do. Oh, great, Carmen. Lovely to hear. I hate cardio, and I also don't think that for my body type, having also PCOS, what I know, and certainly what I know from the research, is that doing heavy weights resistance training is definitely much better in terms of insulin, balancing insulin, which balancing hormones, metabolic and reproductive, go hand in hand. And, I kind of like the feeling of being able to challenge myself, challenge my body, do things that, and also, my God, can I just say, like, reshaping. If you ever want to reshape your body, weights training is the only thing. So those are all reasons to, as to why I choose to do weights. The research basically shows that any exercise is going to be helpful in terms of sleep. But here are a couple of very important points for you to be able to implement this effectively and well. It is best to exercise in the morning, okay? You will have a better result in terms of your ability to sleep better at night if you're exercising earlier in the day. The research definitely suggests to make sure that whatever exercise you're doing it no later for optimum circadian rhythm balance, right? You're doing it no later than 6 hours before going to bed. Okay, so if you're going to bed at 9 o'clock, you're exercising no later than about 3 p.m. So that can be challenging for some people. And that's why I just say, wake up early. You're going to be waking up earlier anyway, remember? So you might as well just get yourself out and go to the gym. And that way, it's done for the day. My God, whenever I leave my training for later in the day, it's such a mission to get there. And so if you actually make sure that you get up earlier, as per my first big idea, and do get out of bed, then go to the gym, you're going to be implementing those two things pretty much straight away. And it will make such a huge difference. Like, honestly, those two things, kind of three, because we've talked about mindfulness already, but those two things, the exercise and the sleep hygiene piece, coupled with the mindfulness, wow, ultra powerful to making sure that we're regulating sleep and sleep balance. So I hope that really is something that you guys will take on and implement as much as possible, because it will make all of the difference. So in terms of, I can see a couple of questions here on Facebook, one of which is, what about herbal teas? Can drinking chamomile tea be okay? Well, look, actually, chamomile tea is fine for conceiving and pregnancy. It is not unsafe. It's perfectly okay. The problem with teas in general, first of all, if you've ever done the fertility challenge, or if you're a patient in our clinic, you will know that I absolutely do not recommend self-prescription, because what ends up happening is that whenever you self-prescribe, you typically end up self-prescribing things that are not going to be, in the grand scheme of what it is that we need to do, effective for your treatment and optimization of your fertility and ability to keep a pregnancy to term. So I don't recommend self-prescription. Problem with teas is that they're usually too weak to have a result, right? And so you'd have to drink so much tea to be able to actually have an impact on your ability to sleep, which essentially is probably going to backfire on you, because it's going to mean that you're going to be having to get up in the middle of the night to go and pee, right? So not a great idea. Teas are not something that I would recommend. If anything, you could get certain components in tablets and tablet form. And that's the piece that, obviously we're not going to be talking about today in this talk, because that's something that you need to see a practitioner and get a proper prescription for you and what needs to happen in your particular situation in order for you to be able to do what it is that you need to do. And it helps, by the way. There's lots of things. One of the things that it's fine for you to self-prescribe is actually magnesium. Magnesium is perfectly okay. The worst thing that's going to happen is that you might have a little bit of diarrhea or loose stools as a result of taking too much. And magnesium is present in over 500 enzyme systems in the body. So you will never go astray in taking magnesium. I prefer magnesium chelate, which is a different, there's different forms of magnesium. Chelate is my preferred option in terms of taking it, and it's something that is safe and you could take at night. There are many other things that people would either prescribe or utilize, but that I can't recommend in just a general conversation, because I don't know anything about you, whether you're taking antidepressants or any other medication that might have, concomitant kind of side effects that we need to be aware about. There's lots of different considerations when it comes to actually taking certain supplementation. So that's why it's something that, you know, you really do need to see someone about so that you get that specifically prescribed for you. But then the third big idea is avoiding all stimulants. And whether it is sugar, caffeinated beverages have been directly linked to infertility and miscarriage. So Harvard research has shown this very, very clearly. So what I would recommend is that, and by the way, in the handout, if you've only just joined me, you will find that there is a handout link somewhere. I've put it on top of the video, on the bottom, wherever it is, that you will find that link. But there is a handout for this talk, and in there I've put some extra resources. And one of the resources that I've put in is the infographic that talks about the impact of sleep, the lack of quality sleep, and the impact that it has on fertility. And in there you'll see that one of the things that we talk about is this whole idea of avoiding stimulants. Caffeine is also going to be hugely problematic, and caffeine in caffeinated drinks such as soft drinks, as well as coffee and tea and everything else. Obviously, it's a stimulant that will keep you awake, so you definitely want to make sure that you're avoiding that, especially for optimum fertility, right? And the ability to keep a healthy pregnancy to term and take home a healthy baby. What I would say, if you're watching this talk or this recommendation and you're not trying to conceive, is that you need to make sure, no matter what, that you are stopping your caffeine intake, ideally by 11 a.m. So by 11, you pretty much have taken any, kind of beverage that would contain caffeine, which I don't recommend anyway, but, if you are going to drink it, definitely drink it. I actually only just started drinking caffeine, last year, because I had so much reading to do, I wasn't coping. But, I actually find that it's a love-hate relationship. I won't say that I love it. It's definitely something that, sure, you get energy from it, but it also can really impact sleep. And, again, if you're not trying to conceive, if you're trying to conceive, it's a mute conversation. You should just avoid it completely, okay? So if I've gone through 40 years of my life without coffee, you can too. So that's essentially what I would recommend. Now, in terms of so really, in terms of this last piece, acting pregnant now to get pregnant later is really important. And this is one last thing that I want to say about caffeine. The half-life of caffeine, so basically when you take a beverage that has caffeine in it, the half-life of caffeine is a minimum of 6 hours. So basically in 6 hours, you're going to have a reduction by about half of the caffeine that you've consumed. And that's also why it's important to make sure that you stop drinking caffeine very early on in the day, because it takes a long time for it to actually get out of the system. It can actually take days, depending on how many cups of coffee you've had and how frequently throughout the day. Now, what is even worse, and this is where whenever I see women who are pregnant or have a breastfeeding a newborn baby and are drinking coffee, it can take an infant about 9 days to get caffeine out of their system if a mother is drinking coffee whilst breastfeeding. And in pregnancy, there is a huge link to the increased risk of miscarriage and caffeine consumption in the female. So the evidence is there. It's absolutely essential to avoid these types of stimulants. Men need to avoid it as well because it does negatively impact the sperm quality. And so it's really important to be able to actually take all of that into consideration in the context of having a baby. And in the handout, you will find the link to the caffeine infographic as well for you to be able to have a look at that and educate yourself further on the impacts that you will see and that it will have, not only on your body, but also the body of your newborn child once you eventually get to that point, okay? So it's something to definitely consider. And, it happens so often that people sometimes rely on that because they are exhausted. But the reason they're exhausted is because they're not having enough sleep to begin with. And so it becomes that, again, catch-22 situation. So if we stop the cycle, get onto sleep hygiene, get onto exercise, get onto mindfulness, get into completely stopping and avoiding stimulants, guess what? All of a sudden, yes, you're going to be going to bed much, much earlier, and you might not be as productive for the first kind of 1 to 2 weeks, but that will pass very quickly. And then you will actually be a completely different person. You have so much more energy, and innate energy as well, not external energy to keep you going. So it's really important to implement these things. And then, of course, to, as much as you possibly can, focus on consistency and focus on conditioning and reconditioning. That is the number one thing that's going to make all of the difference in your particular situation and improving your sleep. So I hope this has been helpful. I would love to answer any other questions that you might have. A couple of little announcements that are going to be useful for you. If you haven't yet got a copy of Fertility Breakthrough, my book on overcoming infertility and miscarriage when other treatments have failed, there is a free book offer right now. So if you actually go on to thefertile.me/free book and use the code ROSABABY, you only pay postage and handling. So go ahead, thefertile.me/free book, and you then use Rosa Baby as the code, you will be able to get that book for free. Also, if you want myself or one of my team to assess your fertility situation to figure out if we can be of assistance in your case, the Natural Fertility Breakthrough Program has a 78.15% success rate in taking home healthy babies for couples who typically have tried everything and nothing has worked. So if you want me to give you a second opinion and assess your case, just go to thefertile.me/chat, thefertile.me/chat, and you'll be able to follow through and go through that free assessment process, and we can have a conversation if you feel that we both feel that we're a good fit for working together. And then next week on AGR, I am going to be talking about beyond the sperm count, motility and morphology. There's lots of things that don't get talked about in terms of male fertility that are extremely important. And of course, it's a 50% of the equation of being able to conceive and take home a healthy baby. So we need to make sure that we are addressing the male factor just as much. But what I find typically is that only count, motility and morphology get addressed, and things that also negatively impact the chances of taking that sperm to the best possible health that it can, so that it can affect a healthy pregnancy, is also left to chance. So we want to make sure that that's part of what we're going to be discussing next week in AGR, same place, same time. So I hope that this has been useful. I know that there are lots of things that we could be talking about in terms of this topic, but as always, I like to make sure that I bring to you the things that are going to be practical and that you can implement straight away. So that's essentially what we've done today. If you have any other questions, let me know. I would be delighted to answer them. But the key thing here is do your part, because the rest is no longer up to you. So I hope that helps, and until next time, bye for now.